Quigley in 5, underwater in the yellow lane.
Jazz Carling of Great Britain.
Quigley goes through.
The silver to Jazz Carling. Wonderful silver medal for Great Britain.
Welcome to the Honest Athletes podcast with
Lauren Quigley
and Jazz Carling.
Hi everyone, welcome to episode 2 of season 2 of the Honest Athletes podcast, where we're joined by, quoting from mine and Jazz's last episode, an unbelievable ambassador, not just of swimming or triathlon and stuff like that, just of all sport in general, basically. This absolute superstar has so many accolades to her name, but just to mention a few: 3 second-place finishes at the Ironman World Championships, 1 second-place finish at the Ironman 70.3 World Championships, 2-time winner of the Ironman African Championships and winner of the Challenge Roth event in 2019. She also decided to shake things up a little bit and compete at the London Olympic pool last week for the British Swimming Selection Trials meet. Basically the Olympic trials, yes, not in triathlon either, in the 1500. So it probably feels like a sprint to her. For me, it's probably the longest event ever, but for Lucy, it's probably splash and dash. And she did put a fantastic performance in, winning a silver medal, which, by the way, she was literally touched out in less than a second. So on a 1500, that is nothing. I'm not sure what sport Lucy will be doing next, but whoever's in that sport, I fear for them. And I'd probably just retire now. Before I let someone else talk, I would just like to say, before Lucy's 1500 last week, I messaged her to say good luck, and in her response, she seemed more motivated than anything to get the win so that she could have a chat with Jazz afterwards. So it makes me super happy that this is happening today, but please welcome Lucy Charles-Barclay.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. What an intro. Lauren.
I was looking at your list of accolades, Luce, and I was like, where do I stop? Like, at what point do I stop?
Oh, no, it's nice to hear it. Sometimes I think, especially after last year where we had a year without racing, you almost forget what you've achieved at times. You're like, God, am I still this athlete that I used to be? So that's kind of why I've just been diving into some different challenges in 2021 to just be like, can I still do this? Can I experiment with going back to swimming? And yeah, it's been a mad year, but I think I said in my YouTube video, it's just been about grabbing hold of any opportunity I can get, as I feel that last year, all our opportunities were just ripped away from all of us. So it's about finding new opportunities and just jumping on board what we can this year. And yeah, it's been different, but it's been fun at the same time.
Oh, I'm so excited to chat to you, Lucy. I think there's so many different things that we can take from like your journey and story, and I can't wait to dive into like your mindset and how it had to change from all the different sports and things. But like taking it back, I guess, from when you were growing up, I'm guessing you were a very sporty child. What sports were you into? Obviously, I've known you from a young age from swimming, but was it always swimming, or was there a lot of other sports when you were younger?
Yeah, I think when I was younger, I was so lucky because both my parents were super active. So they'd have me and my sister going out riding our bikes at the weekend. We'd always be swimming at the local pool. And then when I was about 8, that was when I'd sort of found swimming, and I was like, this is what I want to do. I want to make the Olympics for swimming. And even at like an 8-9-year-old, I was like, right, I want to do the hardest event there is. So I was doing the 200 butterfly when I was 9 years old. And then I think when I got to like 15, 16, I was like, oh, there's distance events, which I remember doing my first, I think it was a 1500 when I was quite young at the counties. I think you could do it when you were about 11 or 12. So I had done one quite young, and not many people were doing them when they were that age. And then I think when I actually turned 16, that's when it was like, my coach was like, right, you can either go down the butterfly route or you can go down the distance freestyle route. And at that time I was like, I think distance freestyle is harder, so we're going to go with that one. And I felt like there was potentially more opportunities with open water and doing the 5 and 10K swims as well. So that motivated me, because it was like another challenge, another step further to do that. So I've always been a bit of a challenge seeker, which I think is probably how I've ended up doing this super long distance triathlon events. But I've also found recently that the challenge doesn't have to be the longest, hardest event. It can kind of be, oh, I'm going to maybe dive into doing shorter distance triathlon and just put me out of my comfort zone there, or go back to swimming and see if I can still do okay at that as well. So, yeah, I've always been about challenge seeking. And I think I was really lucky growing up because my parents were so supportive of whatever I felt like doing. So I do remember when I told them I was going to do an Ironman, and I'd never run a marathon. I knew I could do the swim part. I didn't own a road bike at the time. So they were like, what are the distances again? And you've got to do this in one day. And my dad had done a marathon, and he was like, you haven't done a marathon before, and you know you've got to do that at the end. And they thought I was crazy, but they were like, right, well, we're going to support you to do it. So they've always been super cool. And I think that's massively helped mold me into the person that I am, that I don't believe any challenge is too big, and I'm willing to just dive into anything that I can. So I feel a big part is owed to them for sure.
So I know you said your parents supported you, and that's amazing. And obviously it's evident in how successful you've been. I think obviously that's such a massive part of mine and Jazz's stories. Our parents were super supportive. Were they sporty when they were younger, and did you get it from them? I can see you smiling, so I'm not sure which way this is going to go. Or were they completely out of it and sort of learning along with you?
Yeah, so I have a real mix, to be honest. Like, growing up, my mum completely hated sport. She was not sporty whatsoever, which is another story now, because she absolutely loves running now. Like, since I've got into triathlon, she really has found her love for running, and she's massively talented at it as well. So I think she probably had this hidden talent all along that she never dived into as a kid. So she's like smashing 5K park runs now and doing that. And then with my dad, he was always very sporty. He played football. He did that pretty well, I think, at school. He did quite a lot of running as well. And then as I got into swimming as a kid, he then dived into swimming, did masters swimming. So he's always been super fit. He's also done the London Marathon as well. And I actually think because he did sport more of his life, his body is a bit more broken down than my mum. So my mum now goes running with him and is just bullying him on every run, beating him. So they are very competitive with one another, which again, I think is where I get my competitiveness, which growing up as kids drove my younger sister mad, because everything was a competition. It didn't matter what we were doing, it was a competition. So she now does an amazing job because she works with me doing all of my media, making my videos. So now I find that we've become this perfect little team where I'm super competitive doing the racing stuff, and then she wants to be competitive with her videos, making sure that they're showing me who I am, but also making them entertaining at the same time. So we've become this really great team, which is really nice, because growing up, we did get on really well, but I think because I was so competitive, we often were sort of at each other because I would just drive her mad. So I definitely, I mean, she's super sporty as well, but she's got the brains of the operation, and she's also very artistic as well. So I think that we've got the whole package when we combine together, which is really nice.
That's so good to hear. I think it's even so interesting. I look back and think with the competitive side, and I guess when you've got one sister that's not as competitive and one that's very competitive, how that dynamic goes. But I guess from like the swimming aspect, when did you, I guess, focus a bit more on swimming? I guess swimming is a big commitment, early mornings, a lot of training. And even as a youngster, like looking back, I think, how did I do so much hours of swimming and netball and football and all those kind of things? How did you manage those commitments? And I guess swimming, when did that kind of start to take the main focus for you?
Yeah, I remember being about 9 years old when I started doing morning training, which to all my friends at school, they thought was absolutely crazy that I'd be doing training before school, going to school and then training afterwards. So from as young as 9, I felt like I was doing swimming as my sport. That's what I wanted to do. Also doing, like you said, a bit of netball at school and just getting stuck into everything you could do at school, because swimming gives you such a good engine of endurance that you can kind of excel at other sports at school level, because you've just got so much fitness. So like when I went to secondary school, I would get stuck into cross country, athletics. I'd always be the one mad athlete that would run the 1500 at school because no one else wanted to do it. So but once I got to 16, I moved clubs. So I was actually swimming at Hatfield Swimming Club, which at the time was a really, really good club. Like, we had a great senior program. It was linked with Hertfordshire University. So we had access to strength and conditioning there. So I would say at that age, I really focused on swimming is my sport. This is 100% what I want to do. I want to try and make an Olympics in distance freestyle, whether that be 800 in the pool at the time or the 10K in the open water. So that's what I was looking at doing. So my focus was really, really just swimming, tunnel vision, to be honest, like get through my schoolwork, and then focus would be on swim. And then I wouldn't really do a lot else in terms of other sports at school. So that was when it was real swim focused.
I'm really mindful, and I notice a lot of commentators, people in sport, they talk a lot about Lucy Charles-Barclay, the insane triathlete, just unbelievable athlete. But actually in swimming, you did some amazing things as well. And I think everybody talks about the triathlete side, but the swimmer, Lucy, was just as amazing, and actually went to Olympic trials, just missed out in 2012 and making the team. And so I'd just love for you to talk a little bit about how great your swimming days were, because like I say, everybody talks about the triathlon side, but swimmer Lucy was awesome too. So just talk a bit about that and some of your swimming days.
Yeah, I actually think with swimming, it's not been since I've stepped away from the sport that I've realised what I did achieve in swimming. I think when I was swimming, I kind of was just like, on to the next race, on to the next event. So I didn't really take the time to think about what I've achieved. So like you said, I did get to do some really cool things, like the Olympic trials in London for the 800 freestyle. I managed to make the final in that event. So that was super cool, because it was obviously almost basically like the test event for our home Olympics, because it was going to be in the same venue. So that was really, really cool to do. I also got the chance to compete in the Olympic test event for the open water. So that was at Hyde Park, where I got to do the 10K event. That was my first ever 10K. So I think I must have been about 16, 17, and I was getting to dive in with like the world's best open water swimmers. And there's me standing there at 16, like, yeah, I've got this, I can do this. And I must have been so much smaller than all of them. And I think that naivety at the time just helped me, because I was like, I can do this. And I just loved that it was going to be a new challenge. So then open water did open a lot of doors for me to go and compete a bit more around the world. So I got to do some French Cups, some European Cups, go to Israel. It just was like, oh, I can travel to all these really cool places and do that. So yeah, it was an amazing journey. But like I said, I don't think I appreciated what I was doing until I stepped away from the sport, and actually how well doing swimming has set me up for this new sport of triathlon. I definitely wouldn't be where I am in triathlon if it wasn't for swimming. So yeah, and kind of even doing this new journey where I was like, right, I'm going to do the 1500. I'm going to try and get near my old time. And I didn't even appreciate how good my old time was until I went back and was trying to do it. So it was a really interesting journey doing this, because I had like two heads on. I had my triathlete head of what pace I can hit as a triathlete, what pace triathletes consider is a really good swimming pace. So I was like ticking that off, like, oh my God, I can now hit this pace. And then I'd get to like a threshold point where I was like, yeah, but now my swimmer head is coming on and I need to hit this pace. So it's not good enough yet. So I was like having this battle in my head. But I mean, what we did manage to achieve in quite a short amount of time was definitely more than I expected. So it definitely just goes to show what can be done with a bit of hard work and focus in quite a short period of time. And I definitely was one of those athletes who, for most of last year, just didn't have access to an actual swimming pool to swim in. So in January this year, I got back in the pool and was like, oh my God, this is not good. So I think obviously, luckily, the power of doing running and cycling meant my fitness was still good, but I really did have to rebuild that swimming. And obviously in January, I didn't know I was going to be doing this trials event. I don't think I found out until like February time. So yeah, it goes to show what can be done with some hard work and focus. But yeah, like I said, it was a pretty cool venture and I did enjoy it most of the time, but swimming is definitely a brutal sport. And it brought back memories of how hard the training was.
I think it is. And we speak about it actually a lot on like the previous episodes on how much when you kind of reflect and go back on certain times in your journey through sport. And it's only then when you can actually look back and think, oh, why was I so, or why didn't I enjoy, or, those kind of things. So it's really interesting to hear. But I guess I did read that you kind of fell out of love with swimming, and it's very common, we see it in a lot of young athletes. We've been doing early mornings from a young age. It's a big commitment, traveling around the country, and it's very common to see that. So I guess what age were you when you started to, I guess, think, oh, I'm not sure whether I can keep going with this or see a future? And then how long did it then take to think, oh, I'm going to give a triathlon a go? Because I think that's going to be really interesting, that mindset and the switch. And I guess you've said your attitude, it just seems to take on any challenge and loves to see it. But it'd be really interesting to hear, like, I guess, from that swimming and that transition period.
Yeah, so I think I must have been about 19 and I was doing the British Championships in Leeds, which I think you were actually racing at, Jazz. And I raced the 1500, it must have been in the same race as you. And I had literally the best swim of my life, which was where I did the 16:35. Should have been absolutely over the moon with that swim, but I kind of got out and just felt flat. I was like, yeah, I haven't got the same buzz that I normally get from racing. So it was pretty much from that race that I was like, can I realistically do, I think it was going to be another 3.5, maybe even nearly 4 years worth of swimming to try and make the next Olympics. And looking back now, if I had realised how well I was actually doing, and when you kind of look at what the Olympic standard is when they're looking at the Olympic A time, being around a 16:32, I think is the A time that they're setting now. If I had known then that I was so close to that, it might have been different, but I just didn't realise how well I was doing. So, and I think I had moved clubs quite a lot at the time as well. I was trying to find a coach, and again, I found a really good coach. We were on a really good program, but the love wasn't there anymore. And I think with swimming particularly, you need to love it to do well at it, because it is so tough doing the mornings, doing the evenings, doing the gym work in between. It's just a full-time commitment to that program. So when I realised that I just couldn't do that for 4 more years, it pretty much was only about, I would say, 5 or 6 months later that me and my husband now, Reese, were actually doing the Great Scottish Swim. We were like, oh, we'll just go and do the Great Scottish Swim, which I think was around July, August time of 2013. And we both, I went and had an abysmal swim. Reese was a 50-metre sprinter. So for him, he actually had done well, in fairness to him. But I had such a bad swim. I was like, and I don't know why I expected to have a good swim, because I had not done really any swim training for 4 or 5 months. But I'd had such a bad swim. I was like, right, I'm definitely done with swimming. And we went back to the hotel and we just signed up for Ironman UK, which was going to be in July 2014. So I think we had about 11 or 12 months to train for the event. We did not know what we were in for. At the time, I remember us saying, well, we've got a mountain bike, so that'll be okay. We know we can do the swim, and obviously we're going to need to build up our running to run a marathon. So again, I think naivety probably helped us there. So we're like, yeah, we'll do it. We were doing it for charity. So we were like, oh, that'll be a good story because we can get people on board to support us. We can raise money. And it probably was the most eye-opening journey of not even the amount of equipment you need, but as a swimmer doing the 10K, you're like, oh, well, I'll take one gel and that'll be fine. It's a 2-hour swim. But to do an Ironman, you need to fuel a lot more than a couple of gels. So all of that was just an eye-opener. So it was a crazy journey. And I think I was super fortunate that Reese and I both went into it together, and he's got a sports science degree, so he could kind of pull upon people to help us with what we're going to need to fuel with, how we might need to train. And then the long list of equipment required to do an Ironman is just another world. And when I think I was like 19, 20, the budget that you need to get this equipment is pretty out of this world. So again, I was super fortunate to have support of family to help me get the equipment needed to do it.
Yeah, and I like to say that everything happens for a reason, and you've definitely made the most of the transition from swim to tri, obviously. Hats off to you. I think it's fantastic. And I remember, obviously, because I used to live in Lanzarote and you are there a lot at Club of Santa. And I remember sitting on poolside with my coach, Robin, at the time. And we sat there for about an hour while you were swimming, just talking about how unbelievable what you'd done is and what you were continuing to do. And it was just such a pleasure to see you there and just see you around, just almost a familiar face as well from the swimming days. But yeah, everything happens for a reason, I like to say. And like you said before, if your swimming is so hard, if you don't love it, it's almost impossible. And so the fact that you made that decision to move on, it's not easy, but it's paid off. And so listening to the transition is really interesting, to be honest, because a lot of people do finish. They finish on a bad note, or they finish and they're like, oh, I've had enough of sport. So it's great to hear. Now, everyone loves a love story. And obviously your team is you and Reese, you know, the main part of it. Your husband, like you said, he's also your coach, your teammate, your best friend, I'm sure, all that sort of stuff. How did you guys meet? I know it was in swimming, but just so everyone listening can hear. And how's that been, that relationship all the way through?
Yeah, so Reese and I met when we were both swimming at Hatfield Swimming Club. Reese was actually studying at University of Hertfordshire, so he was like on the senior university programs. So we just kind of met through swimming, like you said. So we were training alongside each other a lot of the time. Hit it off straight away. We just seemed to click, to be honest. I think even from the very early days, I always kind of saw Reese as that person I could confide in about my training. Like, what do you think I should be doing? Do you think I should be doing this? Should I try this? And he always had kind of slightly out of the box ideas of things to try, which always seemed to work, which has then going forward just been the way that we've always worked. He's always been, we could try this with our training, this might work, and always bringing an element of fun into the training, which I think is why we have had a lot of success, is because we just enjoy what we're doing. So yeah, we've just had so much fun together as well. Like, we do most of our training together. We can be quite competitive, but mainly only in the pool we're competitive, because that's where both of our backgrounds are. So we're used to just having that little bit of a competitive side to us. But it's just, we have so much fun together. We really do. Traveling the world, going and doing races everywhere. I think I don't really know how some athletes, particularly who do Ironman, do it all on their own. Like, when they travel, they're just doing these long training days alone. Like, I just couldn't do it. I think the fact that we're both doing it together, we can both be tired and grumpy together, or we can both be on a high together. It works so well. So I definitely wouldn't want to do it on my own, and it makes it so much more enjoyable.
It is interesting, even with coaches, like some of my swim coaches and the one that brought me into Rio, the relationship can be really challenging at times, I think, when you're trying to get the most out of someone. But it's amazing to see how you can push each other, but also getting the results. And you started that journey together. So you've gone through all the learning and, I guess, as you said, with the sports science degree from Reese and being able to think outside the box, and it's not maybe thinking the traditional way. You've come from the swimming background and you have so many strengths that you came into the new sport, I guess, of Ironman and triathlon. But when did it kind of start where you thought, oh, maybe I could be good at this? Or did someone spot you and say, oh, wow, I can really see that you've got some future in this sport? How early was that? And I guess, how did the ball then start to roll where more events, and I guess you then get invited to certain things, I guess, when you place at certain levels. So how long did that take for you then to start to realize that this could be a future for you?
So, I mean, to begin with, we were both real novices. I would definitely underline that. Me particularly, I think you have to learn so much, particularly in cycling. So I would be going out riding and you're obviously clipped into your pedals and just fall off at the traffic light because I forget to unclip. So I remember people saying, you might be good at swimming, but you're really going to need to work on this cycling thing. So it really was a steep learning curve, 100%. So going into the first few triathlons, it definitely was a super novice route in, just trying to do a sprint distance followed by an Olympic. I actually never did a half distance leading into the Ironman that we were going to be doing because I just didn't want to know how hard that was. I was like, I'd rather not know. We also did a marathon just to know that we'd done that as well. So I think my first marathon was a 3:34, which was pretty good for never having done a marathon, coming in from a swim background where as swimmers you don't get a lot of impact through your bones. So running is the one where you just have to be the most cautious. So I felt like that was a pretty good time for my first marathon, but it wasn't really until we did the first Ironman in July 2014. And me being as competitive as I was, I'd looked at all the girls on the list. And when you're in the 18 to 24 age group, there's not many women that are doing the event at that age group. So I think there was probably only about 11 or 12 girls on the list. And I'd looked them all up. I was sussing who they all were. And there was one particular girl, her name was Becky, and she was from the Army triathlon team. And she had done the Ironman before. And I was like, she's going to be my main competitor because she's done this. And I remember having a great swim coming out. I think I had caught a few of the pro women potentially who had gone off 5 minutes in front. So I'd come out in front of some of those. And I always knew going into the race, it was probably going to be a day of just being overtaken because you would have such a good start in the swim and then all these strong cyclists would come past. So I think I was somewhere potentially on the second lap of the bike course in Bolton, and this girl Becky just comes flying past. I remember she had a bright orange custom sprayed bike and I was like, oh, there she is, she's gone past. And I thought, yeah, well, okay, she's definitely going to win the age group. And then you can kind of look, the lower numbers were my age category. So whenever anyone went past, I was looking what number that was. And yeah, it was just a really good day. I went on to finish second in my age group. And it wasn't until we then went to the awards ceremony that then they talk about the Ironman World Championships, which is in Hawaii. And obviously I knew about it, but I didn't really know how the whole selection worked for the race. So because our age group was so small and there wasn't many people racing, there was only one slot to go to the World Championship. So obviously this lady Becky took the slot and she went and raced in Hawaii. And it was from kind of that award ceremony that I thought, okay, I could be quite good at this. I absolutely loved it. Crossing that finish line in Bolton, I was like, I'd done so many great things in swimming. I'd won races and I'd had a high, but I'd never had a high as this, finishing that race. And I was like, I need to feel that again, like that. I'm addicted to that feeling of crossing that finish line. So it was finishing that race in Bolton where I thought I could be potentially quite good at this. I want to try and qualify for the World Championship next year. So pretty much then and there after that race, I'd signed up for the Ironman again the following year. And that year really was kind of, I would say, like my first breakthrough year in the sport in 2015, because I went on to qualify for the Ironman World Championships and the 70.3 World Championships, and then won both of them in my age group. So it was definitely that year where I was like, okay, right, I think I could be pretty good at this sport then. Because going to both of those World Championships, I did not expect to win at all. Obviously, I wanted to be competitive, but to come away and win both of those relatively comfortably, I was like, wow, I actually could have a career in this and go down the professional route. So to do that in that amount of time as well, it was crazy. But like I said, I really do think that background in swimming was what allowed me to just kind of step through the ranks quite quickly.
I think keeping it fun, keeping it, Reese, keeping it interesting, that obviously has a big part. And you did exponentially just obviously learn, grow within the sport very quickly. And it must have been a very steep learning curve, I must say. I'm not sure your motivations to go to Kona, but mine would be the lava Java shake. I'm not going to lie. When I saw that on the video the other day, I was like, okay, I need to qualify for Kona. There's no other question about it. You've touched on swimming being a non-impact sport. So there's a funny joke within swimmers that's like, swimmers shouldn't run. It's just a thing. Obviously, you've gone against the grain and gone, well, they should, and I'm going to be awesome at it, which is what you've done. But have you experienced in your time of triathlon really bad injuries just from having that low impact background to now doing what you're doing?
Yeah, so obviously, like you said, swimming is such a low impact sport, and often with swimming we think more is better. So more hours in the pool, more lengths, more meters, that's going to be better, I'm going to do better. And unfortunately, when I first went into triathlon, that was kind of the approach I took to the triathlon training, and particularly with the running. So I went from being someone who only did a tiny bit of running at school to, right, I need to train to do a marathon. So when I got to 2016, which was my first year with a professional license, I obviously wanted to prove what I was about. And I'd had a bit of a battle with the governing body, British Triathlon, to actually get the professional license. So once I got the license, I was like, right, I need to prove what I'm about. I need to prove I deserve this license. So at the time, we'd taken on an external coach as well, who unfortunately was a bit of one of those coaches who was like, throw all the eggs at the wall. The one that doesn't crack is going to be the athlete that's going to win. And so I just really ramped up my run training, and I'd started to get a pain in my shin, which I just ignored. I was like, no, it's nothing. And a lot of people had misdiagnosed it as shin splints, and they were like, if you ease back a little bit with your running, it should go away. And it just didn't go away. And I wanted to do my first professional Ironman race, which was going to be Ironman Lanzarote. And I remember training for that race, and I got nearer and nearer to the race, and I could actually barely walk because of the pain that was in my shin. I was like, this isn't going to be good. This is probably going to be bad. And I remember thinking, well, I'll do the swim and the bike, and then I'll see what happens. And I actually got to the end of the bike, and I was leading the race. So I was like, well, I'm not pulling out now, I'm winning the race. So I remember, I think I took some ibuprofen and was like, oh, that'll mask the pain. Which in fairness it did, but I also think it was the adrenaline of winning the race that was masking that pain in my leg. And I actually went on to finish third in that race. So it was my first professional Ironman race. and I got on the podium. So I was like, well, I've definitely validated the fact that I deserve this pro license. But my leg was so bad after the race. Like, I remember I just really couldn't walk at all. And I had another race that was about 2 weeks later, and it was the 70.3 race in Staffordshire in the UK. And a similar thing happened in that race. I was swimming really well. I think I came off the bike in about third position. So I was like, oh, I'm still doing pretty well. Let's go on to the run and see what happens. And I remember it was the most miserable half marathon run of my life because it was so painful. And I remember I had thought about doing Ironman Wales after this race. And I was like, that's definitely not happening. We're going to get a scan on this leg as soon as I finish this race. And a few days later, I went and had a scan on the leg, and the guy who obviously looked at the images, he was like, yeah, this is really bad. If you had done one more race on this leg, I had a stress fracture that was going almost 90% of the way through my tibia bone. And he was like, one more race and your leg probably would have actually snapped. You would have snapped the bone whilst you were running. And I think that kind of goes to say something about maybe the pain threshold that I'm willing to tolerate, but also that if you get a really bad pain or injury, listen to your body, get it looked at straight away. And I guess the blessing of all of this is this happened so early in my career that I've learned so much about listening to my body, managing my training. Whenever you need to have a bit of a break from running because your body is feeling tired or it's got a bit of a niggle, take that break and then do a sensible build back into your run training. Don't just go from 0 to 100. So that was probably the worst injury I've ever had. But luckily I've learned so much from it, and touch wood, I've never had anything as bad as that since. So, yeah.
And how does it work? Like, obviously you said you have to apply for a professional license, because from swimming background, you kind of just progress, then you start making team, and you don't really have to think about any of that. Whereas it seems like triathlon, there's so much to think about. In terms of like swimming, you just get on the blocks, you've got cap, goggles, race suit. And apart from, I guess, your nutrition, all that kind of stuff, it seems fairly simple. Whereas triathlon seems so much to think about. But that professional license, I haven't got a clue. Do you have to apply, and how do you warrant, I guess, going on to that professional racing scene?
Yeah, so it's quite different in triathlon because there's the shorter distance triathlon kind of bubble, and then there's the long distance. And British Triathlon have kind of all of their focus on the short distance because that's what's going to go to the Olympics. That's where their funding is. So they mostly deal with that. And then if you would like to race in the long distance professionally, then you have to apply to British Triathlon, who have basically set a standard that to get the license in any Ironman or 70.3 race, you must finish within 8% of the professional winner of the race. So then they say that, okay, you're in a good enough position to potentially earn some income from doing this. But also, when I applied for the license, my best two results were at the World Championships, so at the 70.3 and the Ironman distance. And the lady who won those races, most of the professional women were not within 8% of her because she was just a different level, still races at a different level to most of us. And she's Daniela Reef, who's the Swiss athlete. So that's why my license application was rejected, first of all, because I think in one of the races I was like 8.5% outside of her time. So it wasn't quite close enough. So they just want everyone who's racing professionally to be at the standard they need to be. But sometimes, and I feel like this can be in all sports in a way, sometimes common sense just isn't taken into account that, okay, you haven't quite met that number, but looking at your trajectory in sport, where you're going, what your background is, you're probably going to be okay. So once someone else looked at the application and was like, let's give it to her on a trial basis and then see how she gets on. So that was why that 1 year I was like, I need to prove I deserve this. And even though I feel like I've got a bit of an injury, I can't afford to not race. So, yeah, it's a difficult one, but obviously they want all the pros to be racing at a certain level. So I kind of understand it now.
And you definitely have that license and deserve it for sure. I want to ask, so out of all of the list, and like I said at the start, there were so many more accolades and results and achievements that you've done in triathlon. Out of all that list, which one is your favourite?
I think there's two that are my two favourites, which I often have to. I don't think I could pick one at this stage, but my first is definitely in 2017, when I was quite a new professional. I somehow managed to qualify for the Ironman World Championships off the back of winning Ironman Lanzarote. And I was also second at the European Ironman Championships in Frankfurt. So off the back of those two races, I'd qualified for the Ironman World Championships. I came out to Lanzarote to train for 8 weeks for the Ironman. I was like, right, full focus on that. And I felt like I needed to just train for that long just to even finish, because I'd heard how tough it was. I'd obviously done Kona as an age grouper and it was hard, but I was like, this is going to be racing and trying to be competitive with the top women in the world. So I went to Club La Santa for 8 weeks to train. I'd actually had quite a bad hip injury at the time that had limited how much running I could do leading into the race. It was a really strange kind of, I had like a bursitis type thing on the hip, so I just couldn't run properly at the time. So we went into that race thinking, well, your swim's good, your bike's good, so just go all in on those. And then if you can't run, well, you've still kind of obviously shone a bit on the world stage. And so we were looking at, well, finishing in the top 10 would be amazing if I can finish. And then I actually went on to come second in the race, which again, it was one of those almost miracle situations where I landed in Hawaii and just seemed to relax, which is weird going into World Championships. And then my hip just was fine. I could run again. And luckily I'd done obviously enough cross training from swimming and biking, and also using a cross trainer instead of running to get enough of what I needed in order to do well. So it was just the biggest surprise was to go and finish second. So for me, that finish was so emotional because of the journey I'd been on to get to the start line, that will always be up there with one of my most emotional and meaningful finishes. And then the other one would definitely be Challenge Roth in 2019, because when I raced Roth in 2018, I came second by about 9 seconds on an Ironman. So to come so close to winning what is such an iconic race in Germany and just an amazing race, I was like, I need to go away and I need to win that race next year. So my full focus was just, I want to win this race. Leading into it, I was just working so hard. And then to go there and win it in 2019 was just so amazing. And it really is, if you could ever do a long distance race or go and watch one, I would just say you've got to get out to Challenge Roth, because it's just they love it. They're like, the whole community gets behind it. You've never seen crowds like it on the bike that are just cheering you up the climbs. It's like something out the Tour de France. It really is so amazing. Like, I remember just riding and just getting goosebumps over my whole body going up the climbs, because it's just so loud and so amazing. So those two races, I can't really pick between. I almost want to go with Roth because it was the comeback of the year before and the amount of work that went into it. But yeah, they're both pretty amazing experiences.
Goosebumps going up a hill. My thoughts going up a hill was like, oh my God, I am about to go up. I remember going out in Lanzarote with Lauren, and she was like having to cheer me on next to me just to try and get me up one of the hills because I was struggling. But obviously your whole story is inspiring. And I think in swimming, one of the things that's spoken about now is your super strengths and the things that are really your super strengths and what you can work on. And I guess seeing you from the swim side, I would definitely say swimming is one of your super strengths. And you seem to break course records. You break this record, break that record in the swimming terms. What is like your balance with training? Obviously, I don't know much about the Ironman like week. Can you kind of, I guess, not focus as much on swimming because you know that's such your strength, or is it still something that has to play a key role? And I guess the balance of the bike and then knowing you have a marathon, how do you balance the training of all three sports?
So when I first started doing Ironman training, I obviously knew the swim part I would be fine. And unfortunately for us swimmers, it's such a small part of the Ironman distance. We swim 3.8 kilometres, which is less than an hour of the race. And then you go on to ride for, normally it takes me about 5 hours to do the bike and 3 hours to do the run. So the swim is such a small part that is probably the least amount of my training. But actually what I've learned over the past kind of 8 weeks in terms of really ramping up my swimming to do this 1500 is that the swim gives me so much fitness still for my bike and run that it's of benefit. So I think that if I wanted to, I could actually still swim a little bit more in a safe place where swimming's really not going to injure me in comparison to the other two. So that's why I can probably swim more than I have been over the last few years. I mean, I've probably been swimming about 15 kilometres on average a week, which is nothing in comparison to what we would do as swimmers. So that's been able to keep me at a very good level to go and break swim course records and stay in front of the other professional women. And I think obviously to begin with, I needed to do so much bike and run training because I just hadn't done it in order to tolerate what's needed. So doing up to 20 hours just on the bike alone a week to get the amount of mileage in that's needed and the endurance to do the 112 miles. And then in terms of running, again, I think my swimming fitness helps me so much on the run that maybe I don't need to run as much as some of the other women who are doing like 100k of running every single week. I kind of can happily tick along at around 60 kilometers of running a week. And then on those big weeks where I'm peaking, go maybe 80. And I don't ever think I've hit 100k of running in a week. For me, my body would probably break down if I did it. So I feel quite lucky that my swimming has allowed me to not have to do as much running. It's a lot more gentle on the body just swimming along. So I think like as a swimmer, I would probably max out at 20 hours of training a week. But actually now as well, when I'm swimming, I'm just timing the amount of time that I'm actually moving doing swimming. Whereas I used to be like, oh, we was in the pool for 2 hours. That's 2 hours of training. Whereas now I might be in the pool for 2 hours, but it was only just over an hour of that was actual swim time. So looking at it like that, I'm still doing around 30 hours of training a week. And that's my physical time of actually moving in each discipline. So it's definitely a lot more training, but I think having the variety of free sports, I still do quite a lot of strength work as well. It just keeps it interesting. It keeps it varied. And that's definitely something I've loved coming into triathlon. Swimming definitely for me just got a bit monotonous, just always swimming and not a lot else. But I think it sounds like swimming is evolving now and they are really realising the benefits of cross training. I think having a year where no one had access to the pool last year, even more it's highlighting that swimmers swam so well in those trials and they probably had done off the back of maybe the least swimming they've ever done in 2020. So cross training would have allowed them to still race at that top level. So I think swimming can probably take a lot from triathlon in that cross training will still help you. So hopefully that helps the swimmers to do a bit more variety of training as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I think something that people can learn from your story, I mean, there's lots to, but it's having the confidence to do the training that suits you. And I know that obviously Reese is a massive part of that and you've done this together. So hats off to Reese and yourself for going, like you've just said, well, a lot of the girls do that, but that wouldn't work for me. And that's what a lot of people worry about is, well, they're doing that, maybe I need to do that. But actually, no, it's so individual sport. And like you say, hopefully it helps the swimmers out what they've just done into go, do I really need to do that much? Maybe not. I don't know. I also realised that it sounds like I'm blowing smoke up your ass all the time and saying how amazing you are. But I really genuinely believe that. What you've done is phenomenal. It is. That's just the long and short of it. How do you deal with being Lucy Charles-Barclay, having that name, the sponsors, everything, when you're training, racing? There's a lot on the line, there is. And every time I just watch you and I have so much confidence in she's going to do great. And you can tell that you love it, which is a massive part. Does that ever get a lot or too much for you at times? And how do you manage that?
Yeah, I think in the early days, so maybe not after the first Ironman World Championships where I came second, I was still relatively unknown and things didn't go like crazy like people would expect. Like the phone wasn't ringing 24/7 with sponsors wanting to sponsor me. It was still quite a long journey to gain those kind of sponsors. So you have to almost have like a whole resume of results before they're interested in sponsoring you. So it wasn't really until probably after Kona in 2018 where I'd come second again that people were like, okay, it wasn't a fluke. She is competing at this level. That then I started to get sponsors wanting to sponsor me. And the workload of keeping them happy and the admin did go through the roof, which is actually what then Reece took on board. So he put his career on hold to manage all of this stuff, which was just mounting up and up and up. So that in itself was just a whole nother pressure that he took off my shoulders. We're now super fortunate that we actually employ someone full time to deal with that side of thing. But actually dealing with the pressure of being Lucy Charles and wanting to showcase my sponsors and the pressure that they're putting on me, it really is something that I just don't think about. I just kind of put it to the back of my mind. I'm only here because I love what I'm doing. I want to win because I want to win. That's just what I want. I don't really think about the people that, obviously I'm super thankful for the sponsors that I have and that allow me to do the job that I'm doing, but I don't really see that as a pressure. I only want to win because I want to. And actually there's still times where I feel so new to this sport that I still feel like a novice. I still feel like every day I'm learning something new. And just, it wasn't that long ago where I'd be falling off my bike. And it's not actually until like I come back to places like here in Lanzarote and maybe I go around the corner on the bike that I used to be so nervous on and be like, oh my God. Whereas now I kind of will go around it on my TT bars with a crosswind and I'm not even thinking about it. And it's in those moments that I'm like, this is how far I've come. This is the progression. And I'm not a novice anymore. I am doing this at the top level. But I think because the journey's been so quick, sometimes I forget just how far I've come. And actually, I'm not that novice athlete that I was not that long ago. So, yeah, it's been a great journey. But ultimately, the thing that I've stood by the whole time is that if I'm not enjoying what I'm doing, I'm not going to do it. So I have to find the fun in it. And I think to be successful and to find that I've had a successful career is that I've loved every minute of what I'm doing. And obviously you don't love it every time you jump out of bed early in the morning, tired and you're struggling. But actually then when you go to a race and you get that win and you get that result, it was all worth it. So yeah, it's hard to define it, but I just think that I try to just switch off from that external pressure and only do it because I want to do it, not because anyone else out there wants me to do it. I do obviously love doing it for my family as well because of the time that they devoted to taking me swimming as a kid, the amount they had to give up. I obviously love to do it for them as well, but they're more of a motivation to me than the sponsors that I have, which I don't know if that's a good thing to say, but yeah, obviously, like I said, I'm super thankful for all the brands that support me and I hope that I can showcase them in the best way. But for me, it's just all about me just wanting to do it for me rather than anyone else.
And as you said, you are still learning, you're developing, you're growing in the sport, and you feel like you're taking things on. But 2020 has been like, I guess, a year of being put on pause with a lot of races being stopped. I remember last year, obviously, from the swimming side of it, seeing the Olympics cancelled, seeing this competition, and it just felt like it was like one thing after another that was being cancelled. But then from, I guess, the past year, I've been seeing results, Zwift races where Lucy's won the Zwift bike race. And like, I've been seeing various different things. And obviously last week we saw, well, it'll be 2 weeks ago when the podcast is out, seeing you at the Olympic selection trials for swimming. So I guess we've seen you this year, I guess, take on a lot of different challenges, events, races that normally you wouldn't maybe be doing or wouldn't be part of your program heading in some of those Ironman races. How have you managed the past year, I guess, your mindset, being able to, I guess, put some of those goals maybe on pause for another year? And how have you, I guess, kept that motivation during that time?
Yeah, so I think, 2020 was such a hard year. It was for everyone, and kind of working towards a race and then it being cancelled, and that kept happening. So kind of around August time, I decided, you know what, I'm not going to race this year. The World Championships had been cancelled. I didn't want to be on that roller coaster of emotions that some athletes were still doing, where they build up to a race and it wouldn't happen. So I just decided, you know what, let's just not race this year. Let's go back to just doing what we love doing, finding that love of training, going on like a ride and just sightseeing, having that kind of adventure training. We went down to Cornwall and we just had like a holiday where we were training, just swimming in the sea, riding, running wherever we wanted. And it just reignited that real love for just doing triathlon, which I think I needed, because the pressure of the last few years and actually how quickly everything had moved, and just it allowed me to take a year to kind of look back how far I've come in that amount of time. And yes, I'm an athlete who does love to train, but I live to race. It's what I love to do. So I think having that year away from racing just made me so hungry to go back and race, which is why you've seen me just jump on board whatever I could this year, any opportunity I've had, going and racing in the Super League Triathlon, which is obviously the polar opposite to the discipline that I normally do. But it was a challenge that I was like, it motivates me to train slightly differently for it, and just excites me to see how I can do and put myself out of my comfort zone. So whilst at the time 2020 was really, really tough, I think in a way it's been a blessing. It will probably give me maybe 2 more years at the end of my career that I might not have had, because I've just really remembered why I'm doing the sport that I'm doing. So I'm going to take a positive from it, even though it was really, really difficult at the time.
So you had this year where you sort of got not the love back, because you've always loved it, but you did that time away. That video also from Cornwall, or those videos were insane, so good. And I actually go there on holiday, so it's like, don't remember it looking like that when I was there, but I'm gonna have to go back and make sure. But anyway, so you did Super League, which was fantastic to watch, and I think from watching or seeing you on social media and stuff like that through that time, you seem to really enjoy just something a bit different, and you gave the girls a run for their money. You did fantastic there, so great to see, and so versatile. And then on to what I think the majority of our listeners, because obviously we're swimming a bit more based, you decided to go to the Olympic trials at the London Aquatic Centre in the 1500, which on its own is a piece of history, really. The first time the 1500 has been open for women to do at the Olympics, which is insane. So you're making history still in swimming, even though you're long gone. Not long gone, but you know what I'm saying. So the decision around that, you've mentioned that you didn't really actually have that much time of just training, focusing on swimming, and yet you still did amazing. But let's just start at the decision to, right, okay, I'm going to go for this. And tell me how that was. How was it diving back into that swimming world?
Yeah, so I think I'm not sure exactly when British Swimming announced they were going to be hosting this trials meet, but when they did, they obviously then put out the qualifying times. And I was like, Well, the time that they're saying for the 1500, which was a 17:45, I want to say, was the entry time. I was like, well, I can definitely swim that. But obviously you needed to have swam it before they put these times out. So it wasn't actually until I think I went on to the rankings and I was like, right, well, I swam a 17:24 in May 2019. So when are they taking times from? Because obviously not many people swam in 2020, so it must potentially be from 2019. And I went on to the entry system and it was like, yeah, your 1500 is, you can enter that event. So I was like, right, should I just enter it then? It's like, it's something to do. There's not a lot of other racing happening. And where my swim was not where I wanted it to be at the time, I was like, well, this will definitely make me work on my swim and get it back to where it needs to be. So we was actually leading into Challenge Miami at the time. And I think on that same week, I had just agreed to do the Super League triathlon as well. So I was like, actually, my swim needs to be good for the Super League triathlon because we've only got a 200-meter swim in that event, which I need to try and maximise my strength to get any advantage over the shorter distance triathletes. So I was like, that could tie in quite nicely. So basically, leading into Challenge Miami, I was just really trying to work on my swim, even leading into that. So even the week where I was tapering for Challenge Miami, I was still smashing myself in the pool because I was like, I need to get better because otherwise I'm just going to be getting lapped in this 1500. So even leading into that, I was swimming really hard. And I remember the week we came home from Miami, I had about 2 weeks before Super League triathlon. So the week after doing it wasn't quite a middle distance race, but almost a middle distance race. I would normally take the week after that as downtime. But I remember I had really bad jet lag. I was so tired, but I was like, I need to get in the pool. I need to do some more swimming. And I also needed to do some stuff that was going to help me for Super League, doing some shorter, harder bike run stuff. So leading into that race, I didn't really rest because I was like, I need to work on these skills. I need to work on my swim. And then the same kind of happened after Super League. I didn't feel too tired after that, to be honest, because it was such a short event compared to what I'm used to. But I was still obviously tired. And that race was on the Saturday. And then I remember Monday morning at the pool, I had a brutal session that I had to go and do. And I was just like, well, it's not long now. I think I had like 3 more weeks. I was like, I've just got to push hard for 3 more weeks. And I think it was actually that week after Super League that I started to see the progress we were making in the pool. Like I was doing some 100s and I was like, okay, this is big progress. This is definitely the quickest I've ever been swimming as a triathlete. That's when my head switched and was like, for this kind of set though, as a swimmer, I might be about 5 seconds faster per 100. And I was like, yeah, but that was me at my absolute best, probably the best session I'd ever done. And it's the only one that sticks in your head. You're like, oh, I must have done it all the time. But I think it was just a one-off really great session that I'd done back at Hatfield. So the progress we made in such a short amount of time was huge. I think probably if then I continued to do this level of work, I would then obviously be able to swim even faster, but I wouldn't be able to sustain doing the bike and run training needed to be an Ironman athlete. So I feel like the progress we've made has been amazing. I'm definitely in the best swim form I've ever been as a triathlete. And now I'm hoping that I can just sustain that, hang on to that, rebuild up my bike and run kind of level that I need to be for some racing that hopefully is going to come up in the UK in June and July. So it's been a massive positive, and what I achieved in 6 to 8 weeks was really, really amazing. I was actually really fortunate as well to obviously have Reese doing it alongside me, but my local swimming club, Epping Forest, our coach Gavin, who again had a really interrupted year in 2020. I think he was like, right, something's actually happening. So he just jumped on board, loved it, was super enthusiastic, would come down the pool in the morning with me and push me on to do these brutal sessions that he had planned, and they all paid off. So a big thank you to him as well for giving up his time for that. But yeah, it was definitely worth doing, I think.
And even as you said, you've learned from even 2019 and how much quicker you are now at 1500 and how much that can actually then pay off with the 3.8 kilometre swim in the Ironman distance. But like, if you could give, I guess, some advice to some of those younger swimmers, because you've come from that swimming background and they might have lost the love for it. Could you give like any advice to those swimmers that I guess there are other options? And what have you maybe learned from your swimming journey that has helped you now?
Yeah, I definitely say to any swimmers who are struggling and questioning whether they want to continue the sport, I definitely gave it like 1 or 2 more tries in swimming before I definitely closed the door on doing swimming. So definitely don't give up too soon. And obviously, if you are struggling, speak to your coach. It's not something that I did. I just was like, I'm done. I'm not even going to speak to my coach now. I just know I can't do it. But speak to your coach about it, because there's definitely a lot more knowledge around training now. And if you're saying you're really struggling because of how much you're in the pool, well, there's definitely other types of training that you can do. And if you do get to that final point where you're like, I'm done with it, but you still obviously love doing sport, I think that's what happened to me. Was I actually stopped swimming completely. And before I entered into triathlon, I just went to work. And it was during that period that it was so hard, because I just didn't have anything. I didn't have the sport that was what I was so used to, working towards a goal, being dedicated to training. So that period was really, really hard. And then when I signed up to that Ironman, because I had something to work towards, it was like, I'm me again, because I'm working towards something. You're so used to working towards that next goal as an athlete. So I would definitely say to swimmers, if you've had enough with swimming, try triathlon, because it is just a completely different sport. It challenges you in different ways. You're having to learn new skills, so you feel like you're making progress all the time, because you go into 2 of the sports being quite a novice. So it's quite a quick progression, because you've got such a good fitness from swimming. You apply that to cycling and running, your progress is quite quick, which is very motivating. So definitely don't stop doing sport altogether. I would definitely say give triathlon a go. But yeah, there's a lot that can be done to help your swim without actually swimming. So it is worth trying that as well, and just speaking to your coach about different options for training, because it's far better to keep you in the sport longer than just go and leave the sport altogether.
I wanted to ask, what did you learn from the week at the Olympic Trials? Because it was a very different setup to any other race that people normally go to. You, as Jazz said last week on the podcast, you were in a hotel room for the week before your race. You didn't race till the last day, which is hard anyway. But the fact that you had to book a slot at the pool, you couldn't hang around and watch the racing. You're isolated, you're not around family and friends. And I know you can call people, but you can't see them. You can't just go for a coffee and take your mind off things. How was that week waiting for the race? And then even just from there, walking out, knowing you're at the Olympic trials, back to the swimming days, how was that for you? Was it like a feeling of, oh, I missed this, or I'm glad I'm out of it, but I'm going to smash this?
It was really, really surreal, and definitely tough being in that hotel. I think I said in my YouTube video that for me, it was quite a big deal doing this swim, because I was putting myself on the line, and I didn't want to look stupid and just be miles behind. But in the scheme of things, it wasn't that big a deal in what I'm doing and the bigger picture of where my triathlon career is going. But when you're stuck in those 4 walls and you've got one race and it's at the end of the week and you're questioning, what am I doing here? Should I be doing this? I can't run for a week, so I've got to that's gone for a week. I took my bike so I could obviously ride my bike, but I couldn't do my normal level of training because that would ruin my swim. So you sat in that room thinking, this is now a really big deal, because I can't do anything else. I'm in here, that race is there, and it's all you can think about. And I was just trying not to think too much about it. And then obviously some of the other girls were competing in events earlier in the week. So I was kind of looking at what times they were swimming in the 800 and the 400 to get an idea of what they might swim on the 1500. And then also it was like, oh yeah, I could do that. And it's like, no, but I could have done that when I was a swimmer. Can I do that now as a triathlete? Maybe not. So it really did play with your mind quite a bit. But I definitely feel like I've learned to switch off. Like I was able to just forget about the swim, watch some rubbish programs on Netflix or whatever, and just take your mind away from it. And then on the flip side of that, it was just so cool to go back into the swimming world, see some of the old coaches I've worked with who I didn't know what the feeling was going to be, actually. I thought maybe people might be annoyed that I've come back. We've got limited entries into the event. Have I taken someone's entry and should I not be there? Is it a bit unfair? So I almost had that in the back of my mind. But actually, when I spoke to some of the coaches and they were like really positive, they were amazed at what I'd done in triathlon and the journey that I've been on. I was like, oh, okay, I feel like really happy now because I've been accepted back. Speaking to some of the athletes that I used to compete with as well, they were all quite in awe of what I'd done in triathlon, which I didn't really know, again, what to expect, because I remember being a swimmer myself and my view on triathlon was that, yeah, it's pretty cool what they're doing, but they're kind of just, they must be average at all three sports. They're not going to be amazing at all of them. And it's not actually since I went into triathlon that I've realised if you want to be at the top level in triathlon, you need to be near on world class in at least two of those sports to do well. So it is so tough to be at the top level. So I feel like actually the swimmers maybe have realised that, or well, they might have always realised that. It might be only me that thought that about triathlon. But yeah, I feel like I was very well respected and they were quite happy that I was there, which was really, really nice. So I definitely feel like I don't know if I want to go back into that world. It's very, very different to triathlon. And I just think I love triathlon so much that that's definitely the road that I'm on. And whilst I have to be thankful for swimming, because that's definitely what's allowed me to get to where I'm in triathlon, I don't think I would want to go back into that world. It's just so different. So, yeah.
And you didn't just turn up and race, like you came second by the smallest margin. And for anyone listening who didn't watch it, you can go back and watch it on the YouTube, on the British Swimming channel, because that was an incredible race. But Lucy, what does like the future hold? You know, when I saw you after you race and we had a chat and I said,
wait, Jazz. For anyone that didn't listen to the last episode, please can you explain to Lucy the journey that you took to try and get back up to commentate on Lucy's final, the state you were in, the speed at which you were commentating, and tell her what AJ said to you just...
Oh, so like, obviously I was doing the poolside interviews. It was the men's 1500 freestyle first. Then they said, oh, can you come up and chat on the women's 1500? So I said, yeah, but because of the one-way systems, it took a while to get over the other side of the pool. So I honestly was running, well, I say fast, but not in triathlon terms and running terms, it wasn't very fast, but I was out of breath and there's a lot of steps to get up there. And I remember getting up and I was so out of breath and so excited. I guess I just watched the men's 1500 and then I was watching you guys race the 1500 women's, and like I was so out of breath and I was just so excited to talk about it because obviously I love distance swimming, and I was talking too quickly and I was like, and Lucy, she's great, and the other commentator Andy Jameson said to me, just slow down, when he wrote to me on a bit of paper, talk slower. But obviously I was so excited, and I had a couple of compliments actually. People were like, oh, Jazz's triathlon knowledge. I think it was just because I knew the distance of the events and from watching you compete and stuff. But I guess being there and being able to watch you, like, I found it so inspiring just seeing you get stuck into these races, you know. It's like, for some people that might be quite a daunting experience, or to, I don't know, look quite vulnerable, is going in when you've been doing triathlon for so long. But you just went in and there was no fear. Even chatting to my old swim coach, David McNulty, and he was like, I love how she just went for it on the first 100 and got herself stuck in. And I said, yeah, like there just seems to be no challenge that you can't attack. And obviously, as I just said, from talking to you after your race, I did want to do the poolside interview, but I was only allowed to do the race winners or if people got in the consideration time, which the consideration times are super quick. But saying to you, obviously, you had the dream as a young girl to go to the Olympics for swimming. But I personally would love to see you in the triathlon, because I think that distance and any challenge you seem to put your mind to, you seem to absolutely smash. So what does the future hold for Lucy going forward?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, the Olympics has always been the dream for me. And I think even if I was able to win the Ironman World Championships multiple times and come away from this sport, later in life, I would always be like, but I didn't do the Olympics. And that was always the dream. I feel like there would always be this what if, which I never want to come away from sport with that. So I definitely want to give the Olympics a go for triathlon, which won't be this year because that's already selected and that's done and dusted. But for Paris in 2024, it seems like a realistic window of time to potentially give that a go, which even if I didn't make it, but I felt like I went all in, I gave everything to it, then I could come away from the sport knowing, well, I did everything I could, I didn't make it. So at some stage, I will do some short course racing, not like the Super League stuff, some actual stuff on the World Triathlon Series. The only difficulty at the moment is I would have loved to do that in the near future. But our talent in Great Britain is so diverse and so much depth to the females that basically if you want to get on a short distance start line, you need to be ranked within the top 5 in the country. Obviously in the country on your world rankings. Obviously I haven't got any points at the moment because I've never done any short course racing. So for me to get on a start line at the moment, there either needs to be less than 5 of our women want to go and race, or the whole race itself isn't fully subscribed so that we might be able to get some additional slots. The issue with that is there's so little racing at the moment that every race that comes up, more than 5 of our women already want to do it. And then there's a reserve list, which then I'm at the bottom of. So it's looking more and more unlikely that I'll be able to get on a start line anytime soon. But if an opportunity arises, then I'll definitely give it a go. But for me, I still have only come second at the World Championships 3 times. So in the kind of more short-term future, I want to try and win that race. But it's been quite good to get some more education on how it works for the short distance, so that if I'm looking at Paris, it's how early do I need to go on board of that journey to accumulate points, to get on start lines, to be at test events, and to actually qualify. So it's been another learning curve, learning that system, because short course is completely different to long course. But yeah, never say never. I'm definitely going to give that a shot for Paris. That is the plan.
To all the listeners, this has been a real treat for us to have you on, Lucy. Even just for me and you, just have this conversation. We might not put it out, just keep it for ourselves. No, we'll definitely put it out. But no, to thank you for coming on. Thanks for just, honestly, like I said at the start, being a real positive ambassador for sport, for females in sport, for being able to cross over, just to show the enjoyment, the individualness of being an athlete. There's so many things that you show sport in such a positive light. And, you know, we're proud of you. We're proud that you come from swimming, obviously. And that's always a nice touch. But yeah, no, just thanks for doing everything that you're doing, and to Reese as well, and to Lola, because Lola's a big part of Team Charles-Barclay. But yeah, no, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on. It's always great to chat to you. You always have some great stuff to talk about, and it's just a joy to watch you to race and see you on socials and all that sort of stuff. Also to Holly. I've been messaging Holly this week just to say she's doing some insane stuff and just to keep it up, because it's a treat for us when a video comes out and all that. So thank you for coming on.
No, I just think it's so inspiring, amazing. And at times in life, sport, we can have quite tunnel vision and think it has to be a certain way to go down that path and to achieve what we want to. But I think, if anything, from me listening, from everyone listening, Lucy, like the way you, I guess, had your goals on the swimming side and then it got changed and you thought, well, I'll try something else. And it's like, you don't have to go a certain route. And it's given me goosebumps at times, like listening to your story and how incredible, and that people can really relate, that they don't have to just do that one thing and they can adjust and take different, I guess, routes to get to achieve those dreams, and how you don't always have to, I guess you say with swimming, you get back down to what was close to your best times when you were a swimmer, of a lot less training, and how we can actually think a bit differently, think outside the box. But I've absolutely loved it, I can't wait to see you in the future in whatever events you enter. I'm always keeping an eye, because one thing about you, Lucy, from watching and hearing about you, is that you just give everything 100% and you love to race. And I think that is just so incredible to watch. So no, I've absolutely loved it, listening, watching, hearing about you over the past over how many years, and I just can't wait to see what the future holds.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been so lovely to chat to you both. I mean, as a swimmer, you were both athletes that I looked up to and was in awe of. So it really, really is lovely to chat to you both and relive some of those swimming memories with you. So thank you very much for having me on. It's been lovely to chat.
No worries. And thanks for everyone that's listened to the episode. Hope you've enjoyed it. I'm sure you have. There's nothing to not enjoy in this episode. And yeah, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.